And in the Bible, you've got apostles that are called by Jesus Christ, directly by Jesus Christ, either while he was here on earth, that's the 12 apostles, or when he had ascended back into heaven, the Apostle Paul. And then you've got those apostles. And then you've got apostles in the New Testament that were associated with those apostles called by Jesus. And that's all the apostles you've got in the Bible. You don't have any more apostles. So, in other words, those who worked with Paul, they were apostles. Barnabas was an apostle. I think it was on Thursday evening we mentioned Acts 14:14 as a place where you know there were at least 14 apostles. And there you've got 2 apostles mentioned outside of the 12 apostles. So you've got 12 plus 2 is 14. That's Acts 14:14. Barnabas and Paul. Now, what's our job? You know what our big job is? Our big job is not to sit here in Beeville and just argue with each other. Our big job is not to get excited about what color the carpet is. Our big job is not to get excited on what color the walls are. Our big job is not to get excited about whether or not these are real or plastic. I think they're plastic. I haven't seen anybody watering. Our big job is not to worry about whether or not our plates are made out of oak or ivory. Our big job is to get the gospel out in this generation to those who have not heard it in this generation. There are people being born right now that will never hear the gospel of the grace of God because the church of Jesus Christ has gone apostate to it. We've closed our ears. We've closed our eyes to what God told us to do. We've got other things to do. And whenever we stand at the judgment seat of Christ, God is going to demand that work be tried. And it will be. Folks, it's a serious thing. It was serious enough that I left. I left the church that was established. I left it. And I said, I got to get busy doing what I can do about getting the gospel to those who haven't heard. Missionaries go into churches, and I tell you, it happens. Missionaries go into churches, and they're trying to get to the field. Granted, you say, well, the missionaries don't do anything. Sure, there's people don't do anything everywhere and everything. Sure. That's like the old argument, well, I'm not going to church because there's hypocrites there. There's hypocrites in everything. Just stop doing it. Just stop living if you're going to stay away from hypocrites. They're everywhere. But there are people who are trying to go to the field. Now, go to a church. And the church, knowing that they've driven 200-300 miles to get to this church and tell them about missions, and they are presenting themselves as missionaries to go out because this church can't go out. You can't go to the Philippines. You can't go to China. You can't go to Mongolia. But you should have a desire to help somebody else to go. But they go into churches, and churches won't even give them enough money for gas. And they go away, and another church, though, will give, and they'll get the blessing, and that church doesn't. It's not the missionary that misses the blessing. Folks, it's us whenever we don't do what we're supposed to do. We miss it because this is what God's told us to do. I noticed an amazing thing. That when a child of God gets busy doing what he can or she can about getting out the gospel to those that are lost, God blesses them. Why? Because when you're in the will of God, God will meet your needs. He's obligated to. He's promised it. I saw a man on television the other night, and he's saying, send me $1,000 seed offering. You send me $1,000. Oh, boy, he's slick. You send me $1,000, and I guarantee you God will bless you. No, no, no. I'll tell you what, if you put $1,000 into the plan of getting the gospel to those who haven't heard, I don't mean just giving to anybody and anything, comes along, but getting it into conscientious works where the money is directed and put into building churches and winning souls in places where the gospel hasn't gone, I guarantee you that's where the blessings are. Too bad we got folks trying to get into heaven like Forrest Gump. I read this and I'm through with it. Forrest Gump died. Did you hear about Forrest Gump and St. Peter? Forrest Gump died, and he stood in front of St. Peter at the pearly gates, and St. Peter said, welcome, Forrest. We've heard a lot about you. He said, however, it's getting pretty crowded up here, and now we've got to give people an entrance examination before we let them in. Okay, Forrest said, I hope it's not too hard. I've already been through a test. My mama used to say life is like a final exam. It's hard. Forrest, I know that, but this test is only 3 questions. And here's 3 questions. Which 2 days of the week begin with the letter T? That's the first question. Second question, how many seconds are in a year? Third question, what's God's first name? Well, Forrest said, the first one's easy. Which 2 days of the week begin with the letter T? Today and tomorrow. Peter looked surprised and said, well, that wasn't the answer I was looking for, but I got to give you credit for it. The next question said, Forrest, how many seconds are in a year? There's 12. 12? Yeah. January 2nd, February 2nd, March 2nd, April 2nd. Peter said, good night. And I said, I see what you mean on that. I got to give you a credit for that one too. I can't deny you that. There are seconds in a year. The last question, Forrest said, what's God's first name? He said, God's first name is Andy. St. Peter said, Andy? How'd you come up with Andy? I learned it in church. We used to sing about it. And he walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me I am his own. Amen. Boy, I tell you, that's bright, isn't it? Let's go on.